My name is Dana Whitfield, and I am 38 years old. Not long ago, I sat at the defendant's table in a county courtroom while a lawyer in a suit worth more than my car called me a kidnapper, and the 3 children I had raised for 12 years were named as my victims. Across the aisle, my sister wept beautifully into a tissue she never actually used. 12 years earlier, she had pulled into my driveway, unbuckled her 3 kids, and asked me for 1 single hour. 1 hour. What I got instead was 12 years of fevers, packed lunches, and midnight nightmares. She got a fresh start somewhere else. Now she was back with new highlights in her hair, an expensive lawyer at her side, and a petition claiming I had stolen her family from her. But nobody in that courtroom knew what I was carrying. Tucked beneath my checkbook in my bag sat a sealed envelope, 11 years old, never opened, a city's name written across the corner in my own hand. What happened when the judge finally broke that seal, what he asked me, and what I said back, I promise I will get there. Stay with me, because it is worth it. Let me take you back 12 years to a Saturday morning in early summer. I was 26 then, renting a small rundown house on Larkspur Street, working night shifts at a diner, saving every tip toward my dream of culinary school. My sister Renee's minivan rattled into my driveway at 9:15 that morning, the muffler groaning. She was 31 at the time, a widow of just over a year, and she walked up to my door carrying baby Ren on her hip like an afterthought. Ren was barely a year old and running a low fever. Behind her, 3-year-old Caleb stumbled along half asleep, and 5-year-old Nora trailed last, clutching everyone's shoes in her small arms. Renee dragged 2 garbage bags stuffed with clothes up my steps and dropped them like she was making a donation drop-off. She smelled like cigarettes and drugstore perfume, and her eyes kept darting back toward the van idling at the curb. She told me she had an appointment she could not miss, one she could not bring the kids to. Then she shoved the diaper bag into my arms and gave me that smile she had been using to get her way since we were children. Just 1 hour, Dana, I swear it. I asked what kind of appointment happens on a Saturday morning. She was already backing down my steps as she answered, vague and rushed. Little Nora waved at the van until it disappeared around the corner, then turned to me and asked if we had popsicles. We did, and that became our whole afternoon. Popsicles and cartoons, and a fever that finally broke by 4 o'clock. By 6 that evening I called Renee. By 7 I called again. By 10 I stood at my front window with baby Ren asleep against my shoulder, watching every pair of headlights roll up the street and then keep going. The porch light stayed on the entire night. That van never came back. By Sunday her voicemail was full. By Monday, it would not even ring. I called the police, and a tired officer explained, almost gently, that adults are legally allowed to vanish, that leaving children with family is not a crime, and that I should call back only if I found evidence of foul play. The only foul play I discovered came Tuesday, when her landlord let me into her apartment because she owed him rent, and he hoped I would pay it. The apartment was not ransacked. It was simply empty. Closets bare. Hangers gone. The crib already sold off on some online listing. A neighbor told me a moving truck had come through the week before. She had packed up her entire life while I was working a double shift, then driven her children to my porch as the very last errand on her list. My mother sat at my kitchen table that week with her hands folded and said the words she would repeat for years to come. She will come back, Dana. She is their mother. She said it like it was a law of physics, something unquestionable. I wanted so badly to believe her. Renee's husband had died in a highway accident just over a year before, and grief does strange, terrible things to people, so maybe she just needed space. That is what I told myself while buying a secondhand car seat at a yard sale. Then one night, tucking 5-year-old Nora into a fold-out bed in a room still cluttered with my old cookbooks, she looked up at me and asked if we had done something wrong. I told her no, baby, somebody did, but it was never you. People ask how I managed to raise 3 children overnight with zero warning, and the honest answer is badly, then less badly, and eventually you look up and realize a year has passed. I shoved my culinary school application into a drawer and took every extra shift the diner would give me. I learned Ren would only sleep with the dryer running. I learned Caleb wheezed when he cried too hard, and that a nebulizer is not cheap even with coupons. I learned Lice shampoo goes on sale in August, and that shame is a luxury I could no longer afford, so I let it go. We got on assistance, and I stood in line behind women just as exhausted as I was, and not one of them ever asked where the children's mother had gone. My mother helped where she could, watching the kids on my late nights, loving them fiercely, but her generation had rules about airing family troubles. You did not use the word abandoned at church. You said Renee was traveling. For a while, I even let the children believe some softened version of that because what do you tell a 5-year-old? The truth had teeth, and she was too small for it. The first real obstacle was not money. It was a clipboard. Kindergarten registration for Caleb. One line near the bottom read signature of parent or legal guardian. I stood in that school office holding a pen I had no legal right to use. The secretary was kind about it. She had clearly seen this before. Aunts, grandmothers, older sisters, she said gently, sliding the form back toward me. You're going to need paperwork, sweetheart. And that paperwork, as it turned out, required my sister. The clipboard had been a warning. The emergency room became the verdict. 14 months into raising them, 4-year-old Caleb caught a chest cold that turned dangerous at 2 a.m, his little ribs pulling with every breath. I rushed him in, and somewhere between triage and the treatment room, a nurse asked the question that changed everything. Are you his mother?
No.
Legal guardian?
No.
She was kind, and they treated him anyway because that is simply what emergency rooms do. But a hospital social worker found me in the hallway near dawn with a folder and a soft voice, and she explained my situation plainly. I had no legal standing whatsoever. I could not consent to surgery if it ever came to that. I could not enroll them in school properly, insure them, or protect them. And if the wrong person made the wrong phone call, the county could remove all 3 children into foster care, while the system figured out what I legally was to them. Strangers' houses. Possibly separate strangers' houses. I sat in my car in that parking garage as the sun rose, Caleb sleeping against the window, and I made the first truly cold decision of my life. That Monday I hired a lawyer who told me the cleanest path forward was legal custody through juvenile court, and that path ran directly through my sister's signature. Nobody had heard from Renee in 14 months, so I hired a private investigator too, $1,800 half paid up front. He located her within 9 days, working at a lounge outside Tulsa under her maiden name. I drained my culinary school savings, took 2 days off, and drove 900 miles. She agreed to meet me at a motel off the interstate because she did not want me seeing where she actually lived. 14 months had changed her, made her look both better and worse. New acrylic nails, an expensive jacket, and eyes that had already checked out of our family entirely, like it was a room she had finished paying rent on. I laid the papers on the small table by the window, a consent to legal custody form, a notary already scheduled to arrive at 3. Renee flipped through the pages the way you flip through a restaurant menu. She never once asked about Ren's fever, or Caleb's lungs, or whether Nora still carried everyone's shoes. She asked what was in it for her. I want to be careful here because this is the part of the story I kept sealed for 11 years, and I am still going to keep it sealed a little longer. There was a price. She wrote it herself on the motel stationery, in the same looping handwriting our mother used to praise. I read what she had written, and something inside me went very quiet, and it never got loud again. I paid it. The notary arrived at 3, watched her sign, stamped the seal, And as I slid the folder into my bag, Renee lit a cigarette and smiled through the smoke. "You always wanted to play house with my kids," she said. "Congratulations." I paused at the door and told her the plain truth. "I am not playing anything. I am just the one who stayed." Then I drove 900 miles home with a folder on the passenger seat worth more than my entire car, pulled into my driveway at midnight, and stood in the doorway of the children's room just listening to them breathe. What she made me trade for that signature, I will tell you when I am finally able to say it out loud. We are not there yet. The juvenile court granted me legal custody that fall, and the next decade unfolded the way bread rises, slowly, and then all at once. I will be honest about one thing: I did try to close that door permanently. 5 years in, I filed to terminate her parental rights, so I could adopt the children outright. It cost me $4,000 in fees and died on the table because Renee hired a lawyer just long enough to object, then disappeared again, and the case stalled out until it was dismissed for lack of prosecution. The law leaves a door cracked open for mothers, and I learned to sleep beside that cracked door. Life still got good. I opened a small bakery 6 years ago using a business loan and a second-hand mixer I named Gladys. I bought the house on Larkspur Street 5 years ago, the very same house, because these kids had already survived enough upheaval. I packed roughly 4,000 lunchboxes. I sat through stomach flu, a broken wrist, 2 science fairs, and 1 middle school heartbreak that demanded emergency pancakes at midnight. The children called me D, and I never once asked for more than that. And every June, without fail, a single blank postcard would appear in my mailbox. No signature, no message, just a beach in Florida, or a casino somewhere in Nevada, or a cold mountain range. The first one terrified me, and I called my lawyer, but there was nothing to be done about a blank rectangle of cardstock. So I stopped telling anyone and kept them bundled with a rubber band in the junk drawer, trying not to think too hard about what they meant. Somebody out there still knew our address. Somebody was keeping track of us. 8 months ago, my mother suffered a stroke at her kitchen table, a crossword puzzle half finished beside her, the kettle still warm. She was 71. At the funeral, Ren gripped my hand so tightly her ring left a mark on my finger. I kept thinking that my mother had died, still believing her other daughter would walk in late, the way she was always late for everything. She never came. The will was simple and surprised nobody who had watched my mother's final years unfold. The old farmhouse on the edge of town, $312,000 in insurance money, and a lifetime of frugal saving, all placed into a trust for her 3 grandchildren, meant for college and for their future. I was named trustee. My sister's name appeared exactly once, in the kind of sentence lawyers write when someone has been thought about carefully and then deliberately left out. But here's the thing about probate nobody warns you about: the law is thorough. And estate must notify every heir, even the disinherited ones, even the missing ones. So a formal notice went out by certified mail to my sister's last known address, forwarded who knows how many times, like a flare fired over a dark ocean. For 3 months, nothing. I finished probating the estate, mowed the farmhouse lawn myself, kept the trust accounts spotless. I let myself believe that flare had simply sunk without a trace. Then on a Tuesday morning in March, a rental car parked outside my bakery, and a woman stepped out wearing a white coat and sunglasses, and my hands recognized her before my eyes did, going cold against the proofing pans. 12 years, not one phone call, not a single birthday card, not a word spoken at our mother's grave. She pushed open my door like any other customer and said, "Hello, Dee." She looked expensive and rented all at once, much like the car outside. The coat was white wool, exactly the kind you wear when you have never once carried a toddler with a bloody nose. And beneath the salon polish, she was still unmistakably my sister, same chin, same way of tilting her head when she wanted something. The morning rush had cleared out, leaving only me, the ovens, and 12 years walking straight toward my counter. She performed it beautifully, I will give her that. Her eyes went glassy right on cue. She said she had been sick, that she had spent a long time getting better, that she was finally in a place, and she actually used those words, a place where she could be what her children needed. She said she thought about them every single day. I looked at her fresh manicure while she spoke and thought about the junk drawer full of blank postcards, and I asked her only one question. Where were you when Mom was buried? She blinked, and for half a second the performance faltered, and I watched her deliberately choose not to answer. Instead, she leaned across my counter, dropped her voice, and got straight to it. I want my babies back, Dee. Nora was 17 by then. Ren was 2 blocks away doing pre-algebra homework in a bedroom I had painted twice. I felt the old anger rise up my neck and set it back down because I had 12 years of practice doing exactly that. I told her the children had school, routines, an entire life, and none of it was up for negotiation over my pastry case. If she wanted to talk, there were proper legal channels. Her smile turned cold, the warmth in her eyes drying up like a switch had been flipped. You'll be hearing from someone, she said. And a week later I did. The someone was a process server who apologized twice, and the papers arrived in 2 layers, like a badly made cake. The first layer was a petition demanding custody of Caleb and Ren and dragging me into court over Nora's final year of high school. Her lawyer, a man named Roland Voss, wrote his petition using language ripped straight from tabloid headlines. He claimed I had obtained custody through a forged signature, that the consent I had driven 900 miles for was fake, that the last 12 years amounted to wrongful retention. In one paragraph clearly written to be quoted by the local paper, he used the word kidnapping. The second layer arrived at the courthouse that same week, a challenge to my mother's will, claiming I had poisoned a dying woman's mind against her own firstborn daughter. And that second filing told me the real truth, because if the will fell apart, the trust fell with it, and if my mother had died without a valid will, her estate would split evenly between her 2 daughters, leaving the children with nothing, while Renee walked away with half a farmhouse and over $150,000. The custody case was the emotional performance. The will case was the payday. 3 days later, a sheriff's deputy parked outside my bakery during the lunch rush to ask polite questions about custodial interference. It took him 4 minutes to verify my legal custody order and close the complaint, but half the town watched that patrol car sit outside my shop the entire time. I sat the children down on a Sunday evening over meatloaf and told them, with words I had rehearsed against the shower tile, that their mother was back in town, that she had asked the court to review where they lived, that there would be a legal process and grown-ups would handle it, and nothing about tomorrow is changing. I kept my voice level, like I was reading off a recipe card. The children did not stay level. Caleb, 15 now, shoved his chair back so hard it hit the wall and stormed out to shoot baskets in the dark until the neighbor's porch light flicked on. Ren, 13, went the opposite direction, going very still, her ears turning pink, asking quietly if their mother wanted to meet them. There was hope in her voice, dangerous, unguarded hope. She had been barely a year old when that band drove away. Her mother was nothing but a story other people told her. And Nora, 17, arms folded, watched me the entire time like she was studying an opponent across a poker table. Once the younger 2 had gone upstairs, she stacked the dinner plates without looking at me and asked why their mother had really left. I gave her the same smooth, worn-down answer I had been giving since she was 5 years old. She got lost, honey. Sometimes people get lost. Nora set the last plate down carefully, like it might explode, and looked at me with our mother's exact eyes. I am not 5 anymore, Dee, she said, and went upstairs. I stood in my kitchen with my hands in cold dishwater, understanding 2 things at once. My children were about to be fought over publicly, and the story I had built to shield them had already started rotting beneath the floorboards. The first hearing lasted 40 minutes, and Roland Voss performed for 35 of them, standing before Judge Warren Castillo and calling my entire life a kidnapping in slow motion. My lawyer, Priya Sharma, entered the custody order into the record alongside the deputy's closed complaint, which killed the criminal accusations instantly. You cannot steal what a court legally granted you. But civil court is an entirely different animal, and Voss knew it well. The forgery claim did exactly what it was designed to do. A signature cannot defend itself. It simply sits on a page while a stranger calls it a lie. The judge ordered a handwriting expert, appointed a guardian ad litem named Renata Cole to represent the children's interests, and because the law tends to lean toward mothers who show up crying, even 12 years too late, he granted Renee supervised visitation, 2 hours a week at the Family Services Center. 2 hours a week does not sound like much until you have had every single hour for 12 years, and suddenly it feels like a hole drilled straight through the bottom of a boat. Afterward, in the parking lot, Priya loosened her scarf and asked the question good lawyers always ask early. The consent page is strong, but they're going to swear under oath it is fake. Do you have anything else from that day, anything at all? I stared at a crack in the asphalt for a long moment. I have something, I told her. I would rather not use it. She studied me the way she studies evidence. Whatever it is, she said, do not lose it. I did not tell her it had already spent 11 years locked in a fireproof box, waiting for exactly this moment. The Family Services Center has a playroom with a large window built for exactly this kind of supervised visit, and I stood on the wrong side of that glass and watched my sister meet her own children for the first time in over a decade. She was magnificent, and I say that with a flat, steady voice. She arrived bearing gifts that proved she had done her homework. The exact sneakers Caleb had posted online. A sketchbook with the specific pens Ren had been saving for. A vintage band shirt for Nora, the very band whose poster hung over her bed. Social media, it turns out, is a gift registry for anyone shameless enough to use it. Renee cried at all the right moments and stopped crying at all the right moments too. She knew precisely when to reach out and when to let the children come to her instead. Ren lit up like a struck match, sitting closer and closer, showing her mother a phone full of drawings, and Renee leaned in, delighted by every single swipe. Caleb stood frozen like a statue for a full 20 minutes before slowly thawing, because 15-year-old boys are simply not built to resist a pretty woman handing them the exact right sneakers and calling them tall. Only Nora stayed composed, polite, upright, answering every question like a witness under oath. Here is the part one told no one for weeks afterward. Before Renee ever walked into that playroom, I watched her in the hallway through a second window, where she had no idea she had an audience. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her coat, twice, the way you smooth out a tablecloth. Something in my chest shifted an inch, and I hated that it did. Then the door opened. The shaking vanished instantly. The smile arrived on cue, and the performance began. Near the end of the visit, she leaned down and whispered something into Nora's ear. On the drive home, I asked gently what her mother had said. Nora just stared out the window and told me it was nothing. It got around town before I even made it home. At the spring church potluck, my Aunt Lorraine, my mother's sister, 68 years old, a casserole balanced in each hand and certainty to spare, cornered me by the dessert table with half the congregation well within earshot. She never lowers her voice, not once in her life. She is their mother, Dana, she announced. Blood is blood. What kind of woman keeps children away from their own mother? Heads turned all down the folding tables. Somebody's fork froze midair. I could have told her about the 12 years. I could have mentioned the garbage bags on the porch, or the blank postcards, or a wheezing little boy in an emergency room with no one legally allowed to sign for him. But you cannot win against blood is blood in a town like this. So, I picked up the pie server and gave my aunt the only true thing I could fit into a single breath. You are right, Lorraine. I am not their mother. I am just the one who stayed. That week the bakery felt the shift in the town's mood. A wedding cake order canceled by voicemail with no explanation given. A couple of one-star reviews from accounts that had never reviewed anything before, ever. 2 regulars who suddenly started getting their coffee across the street instead, avoiding my eyes entirely. I never once fought the town on it. You simply cannot. A town believes whatever is easiest to carry. Then on Thursday night Priya called, her voice carrying that particular gravel lawyers get. Voss had subpoenaed the entire trust, every account, every single receipt. He is not building a custody case anymore, she told me. He is conducting an inventory. That night, once the children's bedroom doors had clicked shut, I did something I had not done in years. I took down the gray box. It is a dented fireproof lockbox that had lived on the top shelf of my closet since the year I became a legal guardian, tucked behind the winter blankets, safely out of reach of curious little hands. Everything proving my family was real lived inside that box. 3 birth certificates, the custody order with its raised seal, 12 years of receipts, report cards with my signature on the parent line, a hospital bracelet no bigger than a bangle. And beneath all of it, flat against the bottom like a foundation stone, 1 manila envelope sealed with a strip of packing tape and a city name inked in the corner, in my own handwriting. Tulsa. I sat on the edge of my bed and held it under the lamplight. 11 years, and the paper had gone soft at the edges. The tape turned amber with age. I knew every sentence inside without even needing to look, the way you know an old scar hidden under a long sleeve. Just 1 hour. D, I swear. That is what she had said on my porch, and I had been living inside that single hour ever since. The way out had been sitting in this envelope the entire time. Here is the calculation that kept it sealed for so long. Opening it in a courtroom would not just expose who Renee truly was, it would expose the children to it forever. There are no do-overs on something like that. You cannot unread your own mother's handwriting once you have seen it. I placed the envelope back at the bottom of the box, stacked 12 years of paperwork on top of it, turned the key, and slid the box back behind the blankets. Then I checked the hallway and stopped. Under Nora's door, at 1 a.m, glowed the blue light of a phone screen. 2 Saturdays later, I discovered exactly who that phone had been talking to. I was delivering a sheet cake across town when I spotted them through the front window of a diner, my niece tucked into a corner booth, and across from her, wearing sunglasses she did not need indoors, my sister. No caseworker anywhere in sight. Unsupervised contact, violating a month-old court order. On the table between them sat a small wrapped box, a ribbon sliding across the formica beneath Renee's manicured fingers like a chess move. I did not slam through that door, and I want credit for that someday. I walked in, greeted them both politely, and told Nora the cake in my van needed an extra pair of hands. Renee did not argue. She simply sat back with a small, satisfied smile and let me collect my own child. That smile followed me straight out the door, like a hand on my back. In the van, Nora held the wrapped box on her lap, staring straight ahead at the windshield. 17 years old, furious, and scared all at once. Then she pulled the pin. She told me things, Dee, she said. She says you paid her 12 years ago. She says you gave her money to stay away, that you wanted us for yourself. The road noise suddenly felt very loud because that sentence is exactly what a lie sounds like when a professional has constructed it. One true bolt buried in the center, everything around it bent completely out of shape. Yes, money had changed hands between me and my sister, once, in our entire lives, and she had taken my absolute worst day, filed the serial numbers off it, and handed it to my daughter as proof her whole childhood had been purchased out of loneliness. Nora studied the side of my face and asked quietly if it was true. A yes would poison her against me. A no would be a lie, and she would smell it instantly, because she has been reading my face since she was 5 years old. So I reached for the middle ground the way I always had, and for the first time, the middle ground failed me completely. "It is more complicated than that," I said. Nora nodded slowly, the way you nod at a stranger, and turned back to the windshield. "That is not a no," she said. We drove the rest of the way home with the radio off. She never opened the wrapped box in front of me, and she never left it behind in the van either. Something shifted in our house that afternoon. Nothing dramatic, just a door that used to stay open now staying closed. A daughter who used to talk to me freely, now chewing every thought twice before saying half of it out loud. Silence, it turns out, charges interest. That Monday I sat in Priya's office and told her about the diner. She straightened up like a hunting dog catching a scent. An unsupervised meeting arranged behind the court's back with a gift involved, that is a violation, she said, that is leverage. Report it today, and it stains Renee badly in front of Judge Castillo. Then she saw the look on my face. Reporting it would mean an affidavit. It would mean Nora getting summoned into a hallway full of lawyers, forced to testify about her own mother, turning a 17-year-old girl into Exhibit C. That is exactly Renee's way of using children, and it had never once been mine, and I was not about to start learning it now just because it happened to be effective. I told Priya no. She rubbed the bridge of her nose and said I was making her job harder and my restraint deeply inconvenient. "Fine," she said, "then we need something else, and you keep insisting you have something else." So the question sat there. On the first Sunday of every month, I visit the cemetery to place flowers at my mother's grave, and beside her lies my sister's late husband, Ray. Someone should tend that grave too, so I always do. It was cold and drizzling, and I was walking the gravel loop with a bundle of carnations when I noticed a figure already kneeling at Ray's headstone, and I stopped beneath a nearby tree before she could hear me approach.
Renee.
No audience this time, no lawyer, no camera-ready coat, just a cheap gas station umbrella and flat, sensible shoes, kneeling in the wet grass in front of her husband's name. She was crying in a way I had not witnessed since we were girls together, the ugly, unguarded kind of crying that never photographs well. She was talking to the headstone. I only caught fragments through the rain, that she was sorry, that she could not breathe in that house after the accident with 3 babies and his boots still sitting by the door. And then one entire sentence, clear as a struck bell, that I have turned over in my mind every night since. After the first year, there was no version of me coming back that was not a monster. So I stayed gone. I stood beneath that tree with the carnations growing heavy in my hand, and for one long minute, I saw the whole situation from inside her skin. 31 years old, widowed, drowning, raised her entire life to be the pretty one everyone rescues, and suddenly nobody left to do the rescuing. I nearly stepped out from under that tree. I nearly said her name the old way, without any armor behind it. Then she stood, brushed the wet grass from her knees, looked down at Ray's headstone one last time, and her voice shifted back into the one I knew from my bakery counter. That house should have been half mine, she told her dead husband. Mom owed me that. She straightened her collar and walked back to her rental car through the rain. I stayed beneath that tree until she was gone, set the carnations down, and stopped feeling like a monster for what I was about to do next. Depositions happen in conference rooms with terrible coffee, and Voss ran mine like a man slowly carving a roast. Small slices, no rush. "When did I take possession of the children?" he asked, using the word possession like they were furniture. Had I ever restricted their contact with their mother? Had I financially benefited from my mother's estate? Had I influenced her will? 2 hours of small slices, and then, without changing his tone at all, the blade finally went in. Miss Whitfield, did you ever pay my client money? The room went completely still. Priya's pen stopped moving. This is the part people never understand about being under oath. The truth does not pause first to check whether it will be used fairly against you. Yes, I said. Voss let the word hang there, then smiled slowly, the way a man smiles confirming a dinner reservation. $15,000, wasn't it? Wired out of state? No further questions today. And I watched the entire story assemble itself right there in that small room. The story he intended to tell a courtroom soon. The same story Renee had already whispered to my niece as an inoculation. A lonely, aging woman desperate for a family of her own, finding her widowed sister at rock bottom, waving $15,000 at her grief, buying her signature, helping her disappear, then playing the martyr for 12 straight years on the strength of it. It was elegant. It was obscene. Every single fact in it belonged to me, and every joint had been quietly rewired to carry the exact opposite weight. In the parking lot, Priya stayed quiet for a while, then finally asked the question she had been circling for a month. This thing you have and refuse to use, does it answer all of that? I looked at her over the roof of my car. It answers everything, I said. That is exactly why the children can never see it. Priya held my gaze steady. Dana, she said, after today the question is no longer whether they will hear it. It is only whose mouth they hear it from. She laid it out plainly for me the next morning with the blunt honesty good lawyers say for moments like this. Option 1. Produce the envelope. It destroys the forgery claim. It completely reframes the money. It very likely ends both cases outright. But it also enters the public record, discoverable, quotable, permanent, sitting there for 3 kids with library cards and internet access to someday read every single line themselves. Option 2. Keep it sealed and fight this on character alone. 12 years of receipts stacked against a mother's tears in front of a judge trained by law and habit to give mothers the benefit of the doubt. She never told me which option to pick. Good lawyers never do. They simply make sure you cannot later pretend you did not know exactly what each choice would cost. That same week, Renata Cole came to conduct her guardian ad litem interviews, a calm woman in sensible shoes carrying a canvas tote bag, court-appointed to speak on the children's behalf. She toured my house, noticed the growth chart penciled inside the pantry door, the shelf lined with science fair ribbons. She spoke to each child alone in the living room, door left cracked per protocol, while I stood in the kitchen trying not to listen so hard my ears actually rang. Caleb came out after 8 minutes. Nora took 20 and left with her jaw set tight. Wren took a full half hour and emerged clutching her sketchbook to her chest, finding me by the sink, hovering on the edge of something. Then she asked it, did our mom ever try to come back? Even just once? 12 years of protecting her, and the kindest sentence I had ever built for that question. She got lost, honey, caught in my throat, and simply refused to come out, because Nora stood in the doorway watching me, and I knew one more smooth, worn-down lie would cost me both girls at once. The mail saved me from having to answer, though I am not proud of that fact. A certified letter arrived from Voss's office, titled Confidential Settlement Proposal, and it turned out to be the single most honest document my sister ever sent me, because it was written entirely in numbers instead of feelings. Here is what she offered. She would withdraw the custody petition. She would drop the challenge to the will. She would sign a full, permanent surrender of her parental rights and consent to adoption, notarized and ironclad, the exact document I had chased for over a decade. In exchange, she wanted $80,000 from me personally, not from the trust. Priya flagged that detail immediately because even Voss knew better, along with my resignation as trustee in favor of a neutral corporate fiduciary. Priya read it twice and said flatly that it was the cheapest offer anyone would ever make me. She was not wrong. $80,000 amounted to my bakery's entire line of credit, plus most of my home equity, plus every dollar I had saved since. Painful, possible, and final. No trial, no exhibits entered into evidence, no 13-year-old girl reading her mother's handwriting in a court file somewhere. Ren would keep her soft, blurred version of a mother who simply got lost. Nora would never have to watch me prove exactly what I had paid for. The envelope could rot sealed shut in the gray box until the day I died. And all it would cost me was doing the exact same thing I had done 11 years earlier, at more than 5 times the price. Pay her, seal it, call the silence protection, and wait for the next certified letter in 5 years, or 10, whenever the silence came up for renewal. I told Priya I needed one night to decide. She told me to take 2. I only needed the one. That night I sat at my kitchen table with the checkbook open and the lamp casting a small island of light around the whole decision. I had already run the math on a napkin. I could barely cover it, ugly but possible, with the line of credit and a second mortgage combined. My hand already knew how to write those numbers. It had done it once before. I sat there so long the furnace cycled twice. Around midnight the stairs creaked, and Nora came down in her old robe, and instead of heading to the refrigerator, she pulled out the chair across from me, something she had not done in weeks. She looked at the checkbook, then at the letter beside it, which I had not managed to hide fast enough, and my daughter read the entire battlefield in about 4 seconds flat, because she is mine, even in the moments when that is inconvenient. That is what she really came for, she said, not a question at all. I did not insult her by pretending otherwise. Then Nora leaned forward, elbows on the table, and dismantled my whole plan in a single breath. If you pay her again, she will come back again. You know that, right? Again sat between us with its shoes off, completely at home in that kitchen. I understood then that she had known since the diner, maybe even before that, and had simply been waiting to see what I would do with the truth this time around. Then Nora said the thing that finally ended 11 years of policy, sitting right at my kitchen table. She said, "Stop protecting me from my own life." 17 years old. She stood, squeezed my shoulder the exact way I squeeze hers when she is sick, and went back up to bed. I sat there with the lamp and the checkbook a while longer, just to be certain. Then I closed the checkbook, and at 3 in the morning I stood in my closet doorway staring up at the gray box behind the blankets. At 9 the next morning I placed the gray box on Priya's desk, still cold from sitting in my trunk. I told her no settlement. I heard my own voice deliver it the exact same way I call out oven temperatures, flat, exact, not open for discussion. I bought her silence once, I said. It expired. I am done renting my own family back 1 decade at a time. Then I turned the key, lifted out the manila envelope marked Tulsa, and told her out loud, in front of my lawyer, exactly what was inside, for the first time in 11 years. Priya did not touch it right away. Lawyers develop a kind of reverence for paper, the same way bakers develop it for starters. She could sense what this would do before she even read it. Then she walked me through the consequences at a slow, funeral pace, because she owed me that much. Once it hits the exhibit list, Voss sees it. Once. It becomes evidence. It becomes public record. Sealing requests fail more often than they succeed. Reporters can pull it. Neighbors can pull it. And someday, 5 years from now, or 10, the children can pull it themselves, or some well-meaning stranger will pull it for them. Once this goes in Dana, they will all read it eventually, every one of them. I had already done my grieving over that fact, alone, at my kitchen table. Then they will hear it from me first, I told her, every word of it, before that courtroom ever gets the chance. We declined the settlement in writing before lunch. Voss's reply arrived by email at 4:11 that afternoon, short even for him. See you at trial. Bring the forgery. I read it twice, standing alone in my empty bakery with the chairs already stacked on the tables, and I felt a door swing firmly shut behind me. The good, clean sound of a decision you can no longer take back. For 11 years, I had guarded a secret. Starting now, I was simply early. Renata Cole filed her guardian ad litem report the week before trial, and Priya read me the important parts over the phone. The children are deeply bonded to their aunt, whose home is the only stable one two of them have ever known. Removal would be devastating. Recommend the current custody arrangement continue. I finally started breathing again by the third sentence. Then Priya paused and read me the other line, the one aimed squarely at me. The guardian's persistent lack of transparency with the children regarding their mother's departure is noted with concern. Noted with concern. A stranger carrying a canvas tote bag had walked through my house for one single afternoon and placed her finger gently, precisely, directly on the load-bearing beam I had built this entire structure on top of. I did not argue with it. You do not argue with a level. It simply tells you what is already true. 2 nights before trial, over dinner, Nora announced she was coming to court. I told her absolutely not, and she correctly pointed out that she was 17, that it was a public courtroom, that she had already arranged a study day, and that our neighbor could stay with Caleb and Ren, but nobody could stay with her because she was going. I looked at this girl, taller than me since she turned 15, raised on my cooking and my rules and my carefully kept silences, and I understood that the very last thing left for me to protect her from was watching me finally stop protecting her. So I told her okay. I ironed her good blouse, anyway. She let me. The night before trial, I did not sleep, and I did not even try. I sat on the edge of my bed with the envelope resting in my lap, and through the wall I could hear Ren's white noise machine, the ocean sound she had kept running since she was 4 years old. In 9 hours, whatever a judge decided, her mother was going to die a second death, and I was the one bringing the shovel to dig it. The county courthouse smells like old oak and radiator dust, and the ceiling fan has clicked on every third rotation since probably the Eisenhower administration. Judge Warren Castillo presided over the case. The gallery held a scattering of townspeople who had apparently decided their errands could wait. And in the second row, wearing her good blouse, sat Nora, hands folded, spine perfectly straight, watching absolutely everything. Renee took the witness stand in dove gray, and for 40 minutes, she delivered the finest performance of her entire life. She had been ill, she said, touching her collarbone at exactly the right moment, letting the word do its own quiet insinuating. She had gotten help, gotten steady, spent years trying to find her way back to her children. Then, with her chin trembling at precisely the right frequency, she turned to face me at the defendant's table and told Judge Castillo the exact story I had watched assembling itself for months. Her little sister had always wanted what she had. Her little sister had come to her at her absolute lowest point, waving money around, hungry for a family of her own. She paid me to disappear, Your Honor, and when I refused to stay away, she threatened me. That signature they keep showing everyone, it is not even mine. She wept then, carefully, the tissue hovering just so. I watched the gallery lean toward her like plants toward a sunny window, and I understood, with a strange scientific calm, that she might genuinely win this case. Blood in the front row, tears on the witness stand, and one signature she had simply decided to unsign, betting that a traveling notary from 11 years back might as well be a ghost by now. Voss turned to Judge Castillo with the satisfaction of a man resting his case an inch from the finish line, then looked over at my lawyer with the words falling out of him like a door opening onto a long drop. Your witness. Priya walked me through the honest inventory first, the custody order, the school records, the medical files, 12 years of my own signature on the parent line of a child's life. Then Voss took his turn, approaching pleasantly, the way you approach a pie you fully intend to drop on the floor. Wasn't it true I had struggled to build a family of my own? That I had tracked down his vulnerable, grieving client using a private investigator? That money had quietly changed hands between us? He built each question one brick higher, then set the final one down with a flourish he had clearly been saving for the entire trial. Isn't it true, Miss Whitfield, that you bought yourself 3 children for $15,000? The fan clicked. Somewhere behind me, a purse zipper went completely still. I looked over at Nora in the second row, my daughter, in her freshly ironed blouse, who had told me at a midnight kitchen table to stop protecting her from her own life. Then I looked at Judge Castillo and heard my own voice come out level, the same voice I use when the ovens catch fire and panic becomes a luxury I cannot afford. "No, sir," I said, "and I would like to enter something into evidence." Voss objected on principle, but Priya was already at the bench with the exhibit list, where it had sat waiting for weeks. Respondents Exhibit 14, disclosed, described, fought over across 2 motions Voss had already lost. The original, sealed by agreement until offered through my own testimony. Judge Castillo waved the lawyers through the procedural weather and let me speak. "It is an envelope, Your Honor," I said. "It is 11 years old. I sealed it in a motel outside Tulsa on the very day my sister signed that consent form, and I have kept it sealed ever since because of what it would cost 3 children to read it." The bailiff carried it up to the bench, and the courtroom watched it travel like it was glowing. I found Renee's face while it moved across the room. She had gone the color of unbaked dough. For 11 years she had bet everything on my silence. She was watching that account finally close. She asked me for 1 hour, I said to the judge, but not only to him. I gave her children 12 years. The rest of this story now belongs in your hands. Judge Castillo, a heavy-set man wearing reading glasses on a chain, opened my envelope with a letter knife, unhurried, the way judges seem to do everything. 3 items came out onto the bench. The first was the notarized consent, original seal raised, signed in blue ink while a notary and I both watched it happen, the exact twin of the copy Voss had spent months calling a forgery. The second was a wire transfer receipt dated that very same week, $15,000 pulled from a savings account labeled in my own optimistic handwriting from another lifetime, culinary school. The third was a single sheet of motel stationery, and I watched him read it, already knowing every loop of that handwriting by heart, because I had read it 10,000 times before ever taping that flap shut. "You want papers? 15,000. And I will sign whatever you put in front of me. Do not come looking for me again. Tell them I am dead if it makes it easier."
R.
The courtroom fell silent, but courtrooms fall silent often. This silence was different. This was the silence of a man behind a bench reading a mother's price list. Judge Castillo read it twice. I watched his eyes travel back to the top and move down again, slower the second time, as though the words might somehow behave better on a second pass. Then he removed his reading glasses, folded them, and looked at Renee for a long, heavy moment while her gaze drifted toward the exit sign. Then he looked at me, and Judge Warren Castillo, 22 years on that bench in that county, asked his question into the quietest room in the entire state. "Miss Whitfield, do they know?" The fan clicked. In the second row, my daughter, and I am calling her that now, I had earned the right by then, leaned forward slightly. "Not yet," I said. He held my gaze, and something passed silently between us, 2 people who both understood the true weight of paper. Then he adjourned for lunch, entered the exhibit into the official record, and said quietly that the afternoon session could wait until the family had been given its hour. There is a small conference room off the courthouse hallway with a wobbly table and a window painted shut, and that is where my family truly happened that day, far more than anything that occurred inside the courtroom itself. Our neighbor drove Caleb and Ren over from school when I called. Nora was already there, arms crossed, pacing back and forth. I sat all three of them down and placed copies of everything face down on the wobbly table, my hand resting flat on top of the pile. Then I finally paid the bill I had been running from for 11 straight years. I told them about the clipboard, about the emergency room, about a boy who wheezed, and an aunt who legally did not exist in his life. I told them about the private investigator and the motel outside Tulsa, and the papers spread across that little table and the blank postcards hidden in the junk drawer, one every June, our address kept in her pocket the entire time. I told them their mother had asked for money in exchange for her signature and that I had paid it $15,000, my culinary school fund, my someday. And I told them exactly why I had never said a word about any of it, because I was terrified they would do the terrible math a lie performs inside a child's mind and conclude they had been bought, that they were a purchase, that love with a receipt attached to it stops being love at all. Then I turned the papers over and let them read the stationery, because they were going to encounter it in a courtroom transcript someday, regardless of anything I did. Tell them I am dead if it makes it easier. Wren made a sound I will hear for the rest of my life and folded herself into Caleb, who held her tightly and stared at the wall, his jaw working silently. Nora read it standing up, twice through, then set it down and looked directly at me. You let me spend 12 years wondering what I did wrong, she said, quiet, not shouting at all. The shouting would have hurt so much less. You knew, and you let me wonder anyway. I did not defend myself because she was right, and because I finally understood the true flaw buried in that load-bearing beam. I had not only been protecting them all these years. I had been protecting myself too, the version of me that never had to watch their faces do exactly what their faces were doing right now. I had treated the truth like it belonged to me to carry alone. It was yours, I told the three of them. I am sorry. It took a courtroom to finally make me brave enough to say it. Then I slid the copies across the wobbly table to Nora, all of them, and finally placed the choosing where it always should have lived. You decide when the younger two read the rest of it, I said. You, not me, not a judge, and certainly not her. Wren wiped her face on her sleeve and asked the only question left in the world worth asking. Did you ever want to give us back? Not for 1 hour, I said. The afternoon session lasted only 40 minutes, and Renee's case died quietly at a table, the way paper always eventually kills things. With the original consent now in evidence, a notary seal stamped on the exhibit, and the court's handwriting examiner standing by, the forgery claim was no longer merely weak. It had become perjury with a runway. Voss saw it clearly. Lawyers can always smell their own malpractice premiums rising. After a whispered conference with his client, he withdrew the forgery allegation on the record, which meant conceding the signature was genuine, which meant conceding the note, which meant conceding the price. Judge Castillo denied the petition from the bench. He entered a finding of abandonment. 12 years, he said, without a single phone call, $1 or one birthday card is not an illness, and it is not estrangement. It is a decision, renewed daily. He said the word decision like a gavel coming down. The will contest collapsed alongside it. You cannot claim your mother was poisoned against you while your own handwriting sits directly in the record explaining exactly how she ended up that way. He looked at my sister for a long moment and told her the court had rarely seen a parent better compensated by a child's guardian than she had been, at her own asking price. No prison, no handcuffs. Life does not always give you that particular scene, and by then I had stopped needing it. In the hallway afterward, Renee passed us with Voss trailing 3 careful steps behind her. She slowed when she reached Nora. My daughter stood very straight, holding our grandmother's posture and my careful ironing, and looked at her mother the way you watch weather finally moving off toward the horizon. Renee's mouth opened, and whatever words were sitting behind it, she swallowed them back down. She turned to me instead, and for 2 full seconds the performance dropped away completely, and it was simply my sister standing there, tired, 43 years old, holding a purse in both hands. You were always better at keeping things than I was, she said. Even them. Then she walked out through the double doors into the June sunlight, and all three children watched her go, and not one of them took a single step in her direction. The clicking ceiling fan was louder than their goodbye. 6 weeks later, with the abandonment finding officially on record and Renata Cole's blessing in the file, Priya filed to terminate Renee's parental rights and begin adoption proceedings for Caleb and Ren. Nobody objected. Nobody even appeared. The certified notices came back signed by a stranger at a mail center somewhere in Nevada. Nora turned 18 that October, which technically meant she had aged out of the whole question, until she sat down at my kitchen table one Sunday evening, slid a printout across to me, and said, "File one for me too. Adult adoption. It exists." She had researched it herself, the way she researches everything, with 16 browser tabs open at once. "And change my last name while you are at it," she added, then, catching the look on my face, softened and finished it. "You're not just the one who stayed, Dee. You are my mom. The paperwork is just running a little late." The paperwork was 12 years late, and I signed it anyway, and I did not manage to do it with a steady hand, and nobody sitting at that table ever held that against me. The gray box lives on my kitchen counter now, unlocked, mostly empty. The originals belong to a court file in the county seat, and the copies belong to Nora, who keeps them somewhere her sister cannot stumble across them just yet, and asks Ren's therapist, not me, when the right time might finally arrive. That decision belongs to her. We do not keep each other's truths locked away anymore in this house. We simply keep each other. That June, a letter arrived addressed to all three children, written in the same looping handwriting, postmarked from Nevada. I did not open it. I did not screen it. I set it down on the kitchen table beside the bills, told them what it was, and left the room. Through the door I heard the three of them decide together, voices low, three kids far wiser about their mother than I ever should have allowed them to become. They placed it in the junk drawer alongside the blank postcards and the still wrapped ribbon box from the diner unopened. Maybe someday, if that is ever their call to make. She asked me for 1 hour, 12 years ago, on a porch I still sweep every single morning. Her hour is finally up. And the children, now they know all of it, and they are still here. If you take one thing away from my 12 years, let it be this. Blood can tell you where you came from, but it is the people who stay, who show up at 4 in the morning with a nebulizer, who tell you the truth even when it costs them the version of themselves they loved best, who show you exactly where you belong. Family is not just a name on a birth certificate. It is the name on 4,000 lunchboxes. It is whoever is still standing in the kitchen after every single set of headlights has kept on driving past. That is my story. One gray box, one sealed envelope, one question from a judge. Do they know? And the longest hour my family ever had to live through.